Bill Romanowski is a name that still strikes fear in the hearts of many NFL fans. For 16 seasons, he played with a level of aggression that few could match. But what made Romanowski infamous wasn't just his ability to make plays on the field. It was his dirty, violent style of play that earned him a reputation as the dirtiest player in NFL history. From brutal hits to spitting in the face of his opponents, Romanowski was a player who pushed every limit to gain an edge. And today we're going to break down his shocking career and what really made him one of the most feared men to ever step onto the football field. Bill Romanowski's NFL career began in 1988 when the San Francisco 49ers selected him in the third round of the NFL draft. Coming out of Boston College, Romanowski has already established himself as a tough, blue-collar player who was willing to put in the work. However, even as a promising young linebacker, no one could have predicted just how much of a force and a menace he could become in the league. Landing with the 49ers was a dream come true for any rookie. This was a team right in the middle of its dynasty years, already stacked with some of the greatest talent the NFL had ever seen. Joe Montana, the legendary quarterback, was still at the peak of his career. Jerry Rice, the greatest wide receiver to ever play the game, was in his prime, catching touchdown after touchdown. And on the other side of the ball, you had guys like Charles Haley, the unstoppable push runner, and Ronnie Lott, the defensive back whose fearlessness and hard hits were the stuff of legend. But as good as Romanowski was, when he came into the league, he was still raw. He had the work ethic, sure, but he hadn't yet developed the edge that would eventually make him infamous. And a lot of that edge came from Ronnie Lott, one of the fiercest competitors Romanowski would ever meet. Lott was known for his intensity, his commitment to winning at all costs. This was the guy who once had the tip of his finger amputated during a game because he didn't want to miss playing time. That's the kind of mindset Lott had, and he demanded the same from everyone around him, including Romanowski. One story really stands out from Romanowski's early career. During his rookie season, the 49ers were reviewing film after a preseason game against the Raiders. Romanowski had been pushed down to the ground from behind by a Raiders tight end and had simply gotten back up and returned to the huddle. That was it. No retaliation, no response. When the film showed this play, Ronnie Lott turned off the projector, stood up and absolutely lit into Romanowski. He told him, "If I ever see you get punked like that again, I'll come after you myself." For Lott, football was about respect, and letting someone get the better of you without fighting back was the quickest way to lose that respect. That moment flipped a switch in Romanowski's mind. From that point on, he vowed to never let anyone disrespect him again, whether it was on the field, in practice, or even in the locker room. He took Lott's message to heart, but in typical Romanowski fashion, he took it to the extreme. For him, football wasn't just about making tackles and winning games anymore. It was about domination. It was about doing whatever it took to ensure no one ever challenged him again. Romanowski's rookie season saw him play all 16 games, starting in 8, which was pretty impressive for a young linebacker. The 49ers went on to win the Super Bowl that year, and Romanowski picked up his first ring. By his second year, the team repeated as champions, and Romanowski's reputation as a tough physical player was growing. But even then, no one really knew just how far he was willing to go. By the early 1990s, Romanowski had solidified his spot in the NFL as a reliable, hard-hitting linebacker. But it was becoming more than just a dependable player. Slowly, the NFL started to realize that this guy was different. He wasn't just playing to win, he was playing to punish. And that's when the dirty side of Romanowski's game really started to emerge. One of the earliest signs came during a game with the Philadelphia Eagles in 1995. During a game against the Arizona Cardinals, Romanowski was involved in one of the first high-profile dirty incidents. Larry Centers, the Cardinals fullback, found himself on the receiving end of Romanowski's wrath. Romanowski didn't just tackle. After Centers was down, Romanowski kicked him 5 times in the head. Think about that for a second. It's not a scuffle. It's not an argument. Romanowski literally kicked the man in the head repeatedly. He was fined $4,500 for the incident, which at the time was a significant amount of money. But to Romanowski, that fine was nothing more than just the cost of doing business. This was the way he played the game. If it meant getting a fine, or even getting ejected, so be it. Romanowski was about sending a message, and that message was simple: don't mess with me. By 1997, Romanowski was with the Denver Broncos, and his reputation for dirty play had become well known throughout the league. It was a preseason game against the Carolina Panthers. Yes, a preseason game, not even a regular season matchup. Romanowski delivered a hit on Panthers quarterback Kerry Collins that went way beyond the normal bounds of football. He launched himself helmet first into Collins in a vicious collision that left the quarterback's jaw broken. This wasn't just a hard hit. This was a reckless, unnecessary, and dangerous play in a game that didn't even count. Collins had his jaw wired shut for weeks after that, and Romanowski? He was fined $20,000 but received no suspension. At this point, Romanowski was almost untouchable. No matter how many fines he racked up, no matter how many players he injured, the NFL never seemed to take any serious action against him. And that only emboldened him to keep pushing his limits. It wasn't just his opponents who needed to be on high alert though. Romanowski was a ticking time bomb, even with his own teammates. One of the most notorious examples of this came during a practice session with the Broncos, where Romanowski ended up laying a brutal hit on none other than Jerry Rice, one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play the game. Romanowski claimed it was an accident. He said he was engaged with a blocker and didn't realize Rice was coming around on a reverse. But the hit nearly knocked Rice out, and the two got into a heated confrontation on the field. It was a clear sign that Romanowski didn't have any off switch. He was going full throttle, whether it was a game or just a practice session. By the late 90s, Romanowski was no longer just a linebacker. He had become a villain, a player everyone hated playing against. But ironically, the kind of guy you'd love to have on your team because he was willing to do whatever it took to win. However, Romanowski's actions during his time with the Oakland Raiders would take his reputation to a new low, and it all culminated in a shocking incident in 2003. It was during a full contact training camp when Romanowski got into it with his teammate, Marcus Williams, a young tight end who was still trying to make a name for himself in the league. Williams was doing his job, engaging Romanowski in a blocking drill, and things got physical, as they often do in football. But instead of letting it go, Romanowski snapped. He grabbed Williams by the face mask, ripped off his helmet, and punched him directly in the eye socket with a brutal right hand. The punch shattered Williams' eye socket, causing severe damage and leaving him with long-term brain injuries. Williams was knocked unconscious from the blow, and by the time he woke up, his NFL career was over. The incident was horrifying, even for a player like Romanowski. What made it worse was the way Romanowski reacted. Instead of showing remorse, he stood over Williams and yelled, "Don't you ever effing touch me." This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment tackle or a split-second decision on the field. This was pure aggression, and it ended a promising young player's career. Williams would later file a lawsuit against Romanowski for battery and negligence, seeking damages for the injuries that ended his career. In 2005, the California Superior Court awarded Williams $340,000 in damages, $300,000 for lost wages, and $40,000 for medical expenses. Romanowski would later admit that it was a classless move, but there was always a sense that he never truly grasped the consequences of his actions. To him, this was football. It was about survival. And in Romanowski's mind, he did what he had to do to stay on top. But this wasn't the first time Romanowski's violent outburst has crossed the line. By this point in his career, he had already built up a long list of dirty plays, fines, and altercations. The punch on Williams was just the last straw. As if Romanowski's on-field behavior wasn't bad enough, another layer to his story would soon emerge: steroids. Romanowski was one of the many athletes implicated in the Balco scandal, a doping investigation that rocked the sports world in the early 2000s. Balco, or the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, was a company that supplied performance-enhancing drugs to numerous professional athletes, and Romanowski was right in the middle of it. For years, Romanowski had been using anabolic steroids like THG and human growth hormones to maintain his edge on the field. He later admitted to taking these substances from 2001 to 2003, during the final years of his career. By the time he reached his mid-30s, Romanowski knew that his time in the NFL was running out. He had spent years pushing his body to the limit, and the wear and tear was starting to show. The steroids allowed him to stay competitive and prolong his career, but they also had some serious side effects. One of the most well-known side effects of steroid use is increased aggression, often referred to as roid rage. And when you look at Romanowski's behavior on the field, his violent outbursts, his lack of control, it's easy to see how the steroids may have played a role in his downfall. The Balco scandal exposed Romanowski's drug use to the world, but it didn't stop him. In a 2005 interview with 60 Minutes, Romanowski admitted to taking both THC and HGH during his career, but he was unapologetic. He claimed that he did what he had to do to stay in the game, saying that he compromised his morality to win another Super Bowl. The NFL, for its part, didn't take any action against Romanowski for his steroid use. Despite his admission and the evidence that linked him to Balco, Romanowski never faced any suspensions or bans from the league. The lack of accountability only fueled the belief that the NFL was willing to look the other way, as long as Romanowski continued to perform on the field. When Romanowski finally retired after the 2003 season, he left behind a legacy that was as complicated as it was controversial. On one hand, he was one of the most successful linebackers of his generation. He won 4 Super Bowls, made 2 Pro Bowl appearances, and was a key player on some of the best defenses in NFL history. His intensity, his work ethic, and football IQ were second to none, and there's no denying that he was one of the toughest players to ever put on a helmet. But on the other hand, Romanowski's career is tainted by his dirty plays, his violent outbursts, and his use of performance-enhancing drugs. He wasn't just a linebacker who played hard. He was a player who crossed the line time and time again, hurting not just his opponents, but also his own teammates in the process. Since retiring, Romanowski has tried to reinvent himself. He founded Nutrition 53, a supplement company that focuses on brain health and recovery, particularly for athletes dealing with concussions and other head trauma. He's been a vocal advocate for better concussion treatment in the NFL, even suggesting that the league adopt hyperbaric oxygen therapy and other treatments to help players recover from brain injuries. Romanowski has also dabbled in the entertainment world, appearing in films like The Longest Yard and doing voice work for video games. He's written an autobiography, Romo, My Life on the Edge, and regularly appears on sports talk shows, where he still isn't shy about stirring up controversy. Despite his efforts to turn the page on his football career, Romanowski can't seem to shake the label of dirtiest player in NFL history, and maybe that's fitting. After all, Romanowski himself has said that if he had the chance to do it all over again, he wouldn't change a thing. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments who you think the dirtiest player in NFL history is, and if there are any other controversial figures in sports you want me to cover. See you on the next one.